Why does no empire, no matter how strong it seems, ultimately hold power forever? The answer will appear only at the very end of this video, and to find it, we will have to go through the entire history of humanity, from the first cities to the brink of the First World War. Yes, today will be the longest speedrun through history imaginable. It all starts where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers made the land fertile and the first cities appeared. This is Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Yes, the very same, just several thousand years earlier. About 5,500 years ago, Sumerian city-states emerged there. The Sumerians were the first in the world to invent writing. Cuneiform, now a quarrel with a neighbor, could not only be shouted, but also recorded who, when, and why took the goat. They also divided the day into hours, minutes, and seconds. Thank you. Now you can be late strictly according to schedule. For a long time, these cities lived independently, but around 2334 BC, King Sargon of Akkad conquered them all and created the first empire in history. Looked at the map and decided that there was no need to share it with anyone. At the same time, pyramids were being built in Egypt. On the island of Crete, the Minoan culture was flourishing with vibrant paintings, and in the Indus Valley, cities with straight, even streets were being constructed. The layout in some places is better than in some modern cities, and that's no joke. Their writing has not been deciphered by anyone yet. Historians have been struggling with it for several centuries, so far without success. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia itself, around 1754 BC, the Babylonian king Hammurabi recorded one of the first codes of laws, and by 1200 BC, almost all Bronze Age states collapsed simultaneously, almost synchronously, as if someone had turned off the lights in the entire region with a single switch. A stronger metal iron replaced bronze. The Iron Age began. Around the same time, according to the Bible, Abraham lived. From his son Ishmael came the Arab tribes, and from another son Isaac and grandson Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. According to the same story, the Israelites fell into slavery in Egypt, and then Moses led them out and gave them the 10 Commandments.
Only 10. Not that hard to remember.
Although, judging by subsequent history, not everyone succeeded. Later, under King David, they captured almost all of Canaan except for the lands of the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians chose a different path. They became sailors and traders, founding colonies throughout the Mediterranean Sea. They hardly used the sword, except perhaps for a trade agreement, and they invented an alphabet where each symbol represented a sound, not a whole word or concept as before. Writing became noticeably easier. The oldest find with such writing is a bone comb from the city of Lachish, dating back to approximately 1700 years before our era. The Phoenician alphabet became the basis for the Greek alphabet, which in turn became the basis for the Latin alphabet and most of the alphabets we use today. So right now, you are reading the script of a Phoenician startup. 3,500 years have passed, and the system still works. Not bad for an ancient startup after all. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, Assyria was gaining strength. By the 7th century BCE, it had captured almost the entire region, without much modesty. But then it was defeated by the new Babylonian kingdom, and Babylon was taken by Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE. He united the Medes, Babylonians, and Lydians into one vast state, the Persian Empire. In these same centuries, new ideas were emerging in different parts of the world. In India, Prince Siddhartha Gautama renounced luxury, sought answers to the question of suffering, and eventually became the Buddha, the founder of Buddhism.
He traded the palace for meditation, not the most obvious career turn.
In China, Confucius taught how to properly govern a state and interact with people, while Laozi, the founder of Taoism, taught simply to follow the natural course of things. Confucius seemed to be planning something all the time. Laozi just waited for everything to happen on its own. By the way, both are still studied, and their debate about who was right has not really ended. In Greece, since 776 BC, the Olympic Games were held every 4 years, and the first democracy in history appeared in Athens. The Persians decided to conquer the Greeks, but the Athenians defeated them at Marathon in 490 BC. 10 years later, the Persians returned and eventually burned Athens. The Persians. Well, this time it would definitely work. It did, although the Persians still lost the war, as usual. Soon Greek philosophy flourished for
Indian merchants and teachers spread Buddhism and Hinduism throughout Southeast Asia, and Buddhism also reached China, Korea, and Japan. But the biggest changes were brewing among the Arabs. In the early 7th century, Muhammad said he was receiving revelations from the one God and began preaching this. The nobility of Mecca did not like this at all. They were making good money from pilgrims who came to worship pagan idols and were not willing to lose this business. An agreement was not reached. The Arab tribes, who had been in conflict with each other, united around the new faith of Islam, and by the next century, the Arabs had conquered a territory larger than any state before them. In Europe, the Arabs were stopped by the Franks, led by Charles Martel at the Battle of Poitiers in 742. His grandson Charlemagne was crowned by the Pope as emperor and laid the foundation for the Holy Roman Empire. Later, part of his lands became France.
Meanwhile, in the north, the Vikings were gaining strength, raiding and settling in Russia, England, Normandy, Iceland, Greenland, and even reached North America on their longships without a visa, without a return ticket, simply because they could. If there was free space on the map, the Vikings would eventually sail there. Later, the descendants of the Vikings from Normandy conquered England. That is, the invaders conquered those who once conquered everyone themselves. A bit confusing, but that's how it was. While Europe was recovering from the Viking raids, the Turks in Central Asia created their own Khaganate. The Turkic peoples included the Khazars, the Uyghurs, and the Seljuks. The Seljuks adopted Islam and seized part of Byzantine lands. The Byzantines, although they had recently quarreled with the Catholic Church, still asked the Pope for help. They had to call those with whom they had recently had a serious falling out. The Pope called for war against the Muslims. Thus began the Crusades. The Crusaders established their states in the Middle East, but they were reclaimed by Sultan Salah ad-Din and ultimately destroyed by the Mamluks. These same Mamluks later stopped the Mongols, preventing them from advancing further south. Someone finally said no to the Mongols. The Mongols, to be honest, were as surprised as everyone else. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongols created the largest land empire in history, and his descendants expanded it even further from Korea to Hungary. And all of this on horseback. Along their trade routes to Europe, the Black Death likely arrived, a plague epidemic that killed about 1/3 of the continent's population. After this catastrophe, the Renaissance began. Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press with movable type. Ideas began to spread faster than rumors at the market. In Spain, the Inquisition was established against Jews who secretly continued to practice their religion. In 1492, the Spanish completed the Reconquista and expelled Jews and Muslims who refused to convert to Christianity, right on the eve of the Age of Discovery. The timing, to put it mildly, was controversial. The Portuguese were searching for a route to Asia around Africa, while Columbus sailed west and accidentally stumbled upon America, mistaking it for Asia. He almost guessed right. Amerigo Vespucci was the first to call it a separate continent. The continent was named after him. Not in honor of Columbus, which is rather awkward for Columbus, who was convinced until the end of his life that he had reached India. The ancestors of Native Americans came there from Asia in ancient times. Among them were hunters-gatherers, farmers, and city builders. In Peru, they built huge pyramids. Later, the empires of the Aztecs and Incas developed with their temples and human sacrifices. The Spanish conquered both states as well as the Philippines and converted the local inhabitants to Catholicism. Spain and Portugal were not particularly shy and divided the entire colonial world between themselves with the Treaty of Tordesillas, even though they did not really know what was on the other side of the globe. The Spanish exported gold and silver from America. The Portuguese built a trading empire in Asia, and along with this, the Atlantic slave trade began, which continued for centuries. The darkest aspect of everything this era brought, without exception. Meanwhile, in Europe itself, a religious dispute flared up. The German monk Martin Luther printed a text against the practices of the Catholic Church, and thus the Reformation began. In England, King Henry VIII wanted to divorce, but the Pope did not allow him. Henry: "Fine, then I will create my own church." Thus, England became Protestant, and the church itself was called Anglican. In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII corrected the calendar, but Protestant countries were reluctant to accept it simply because it was proposed by the Pope. Principle triumphed over convenience. The calendar would wait a couple more centuries.
Due to these religious wars, northwestern Europe strengthened.